In today's video, we have the latest trade talk from around the NHL. We're looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, as well as the Winnipeg Jets and the New Jersey Devils. We have several players getting ready to head to arbitration as well, including Samsonov in Toronto, Kurashev in Chicago, and a few others. We'll take a look at where things stand on those arbitration cases. We also have plenty of signings today, including some key RFAs in Winnipeg, Vegas, and others. Plus, we have a big announcement in Seattle regarding their head coach. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of NHL news and some trade rumors to take a look at here today. Before we jump into the news, though, I just want to take a look back on this day in NHL hockey history. This was actually the day way back many moons ago when Shea Weber signed the richest offer sheet in NHL hockey history. Of course, offer sheets are unfortunately rarely used. I think they're an underutilized tool. A lot of teams seem to be reluctant to do it because they feel they're going to be targeted with one of their RFAs afterwards if they target somebody else's, etc. But way back when he was an RFA with the Nashville Predators, the Philadelphia Flyers gave him an extremely rich offer sheet, which he did sign, which was a 14-year contract at $110 million. After taking some time, I believe it was a 5-day total, the Nashville Predators eventually did match that deal. Of course, as we know, Shea Weber was later traded to Montreal years down the road for PK Subban, where he completed the rest of his career. Of course, his contract is technically held elsewhere now, but certainly never played for another team besides Montreal after leaving Nashville. But talk about a whopper of an offer sheet. That's the biggest one I think we've ever seen, and certainly be interesting to see if we ever see anything like that down the line. If Nashville had have decided to let Philly have Weber for that price tag, they would have received the maximum amount of compensation at that given time. Now, of course, speaking of going back in history a little bit, we've also got some news regarding a former player. The Calgary Flames yesterday actually announced that they are going to retire another number this upcoming season, and that's number 34 for one of the greatest goalies they've ever had, Miikka Kiprusoff. It's going to happen this coming season on March the 2nd. I believe they're playing the Pittsburgh Penguins that night. He was a 9-year veteran with the Flames, came over in a trade and certainly transformed the franchise. He ended up retiring as the franchise leader in wins, shutouts, having the best goals against average over that period of time, as well as save percentage and games played by a goaltender with 576, 305 wins, 41 shutouts, 2.46 goals against, a 913 save percentage, which are all career records right now with the Flames. He's also the playoff leader in shutouts and number 2 in several other categories behind Mike Vernon, including playoff games played and playoff victory. So he had a heck of a career, certainly well deserving. There's some other Flames veterans I do wonder if they're going to end up doing the same sort of thing for. I mean, looking back on a guy like, say, like an Al McInnes or something, I'm surprised that has not happened as of yet. Certainly Craig Conroy being the new GM, obviously has a firsthand eyewitness case of what it was like to play with Miikka Kiprusoff during his tenure there. So certainly had a great career and certainly well deserving to have his number raised to the rafters. So that'll take place, like I said, March the 2nd. Several key signings today. First up, though, we have a signing in terms of a coach. The Seattle Kraken have decided to extend head coach Dave Hakstol. Of course, the Kraken made tremendous progress in their second year in the NHL, putting together a 100-point season, getting into the playoffs, and winning around at that. So certainly not quite to the level we saw Vegas have early on, but still a tremendous success, really, considering how year 1 went. Year 2 was absolutely phenomenal. So Dave Hakstol gets a 2-year extension. He was already going into the final year of his deal, so that gives him 3 total years remaining under contract now, which puts him to the end of the 25-26 season. So obviously, like I said, after last year, this is no real surprise. A UFA signing. The New Jersey Devils today announced they've made another signing, adding veteran forward Sign Nosek, who's certainly a nice, well-added addition to make their bottom 6 even deeper and better. He gets a 1-year contract. It's a one-way deal at $1 million per season. Last year, he put up 18 points in 66 games with Boston, played around with a few teams now, but certainly has proven to be versatile. He can play center, he can play wing, he can kill penalties. certainly, a good bottom six forward. So obviously New Jersey is just continue to add and continue to get better here. Be curious to see just how much of a juggernaut that team could be this fall. They're going to be very interesting to watch for sure. Some obviously a few ELCs signed for some rookie players as well. The Anaheim Ducks today announced they've signed prospect defenseman Noah Warren. He gets his 3-year ELC. The big defenseman who comes in at 6'5", 215 pounds, played his junior hockey with the Gatineau Olympics in the QMJHL. So it was a second-round pick in 2022. Looks like a very interesting monster-sized defenseman for the Ducks, who could be a key piece down the road. The St. Louis Blues today also signed a prospect today. They've announced that they've signed Jeremy Bianca-Batuka, who gets a 3-year ELC. He's an undrafted defenseman who had played his junior hockey in the Q with the Charlottetown Islanders. Also a really good size, 6'4", 203 pounds. Except it was undrafted, but was invited to their recent development camp. Had an impressive showing and gets a contract. So it just goes to show, even players that either go late or go undrafted, but end up, getting a chance to show what they can do at some of these development camps in the summer, oftentimes can lead to contracts. They're not always ELCs. Sometimes they're AHL only deals, but it's a foot in the door in the right direction and a chance to kind of prove your worth and hopefully become an NHL player down the road here. And so in signings, we also had a couple of important restricted free agent signings as well. The Vegas Golden Knights today announced they've come to terms and avoided arbitration with forward Brett Houghton. He gets a 2-year deal at $1.9 million average annual value, so that's pretty fair for him. He gets that settled, and the Jets in Winnipeg have announced they've come to terms with newly acquired forward Gabe Vilardi. He gets a 2-year deal valued at $3.43 million. That one is structured so that his salary in year 2 is higher. So his qualifying offer will be due at 3.6. He'll still be a restricted free agent. I kind of wondered if the Jets might try to go long-term on him, but I guess the bridge deal it is. If he does well, which I think he could, then that's obviously going to put his price tag up. From the player's perspective, it's not bad. And from the team perspective, to be completely fair, Vilardi's a great player, highly skilled, but has gone through a ton of injuries in his young career, and maybe they don't want to have too long of a commitment just in case anything happens or flares back up again. But all intents and purposes, this could be a really good contract for Winnipeg. I think he could greatly outperform that, given the role and opportunity that he should be able to grab with that team this fall. So Vilardi and Howden scratched off the arbitration list, and we have a few more here coming up that are going to be due. Like, for example, the Blackhawks and Philip Kurashev. Sounds like they're likely going to actually have their arbitration case based on comments from Kurashev's agent. That's what he said, that he expected the actual hearing and process to go through with it, not settle ahead of time. Right now, the player's looking for 2.65 and the team's at 1.4. So that was obviously a fairly big gap, but $500,000-$600,000 difference there. Maybe the team comes up closer to around 2 or 2.1. That's likely where they settle. That's usually what happens. You oftentimes get meet in the middle type of thing, but obviously if they go through the process, then clearly the arbitrator will analyze the case a little bit further. And as I've said before, you really don't want to go through that process if you can help it. It's like going to court and having your employer argue against you that they should pay you less because you're not as good as you think you are, and not as valuable as you think you are. And I said I researched it before, back, it was a couple of years ago now, but it was a very high percentage of cases that actually went to arbitration. Within 2 years, a player was gone from the organization. They might come to an agreement. Obviously, initially everything seems like it's all good and fine, but oftentimes the relationship is damaged and is difficult to repair. So you want to avoid it if you can. But the Hawks and Kurashev appear to be heading in that direction as well. A few other arbitration cases coming up, which we'll talk about here as well, including the Maple Leafs in Ilya Samsonov. They're scheduled for Friday, but we'll talk about the Leafs here a little bit further in just a moment. We also got news today out of Ottawa, which we were expecting. This is not like it's breaking news, because we had heard last week that they were going to be moving on from assistant general manager Trent Mann, but yet, as much as that was reported by, I believe it was Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun, and his information is generally accurate, nothing has been announced, and everybody's been kind of waiting for the announcement to come, checking the Ottawa website. He was still listed, email still working, everything like that. It's just kind of a complicated scenario. Of course, his brother, the former American Hockey League coach for the Sens, was dismissed earlier during the season as well. It just seems really bizarre. I mean, the Mann brothers were both at one point extremely well respected within the org and by the players and just everybody. Like, they just appear to be really good people. Now, the situation involving Troy was weird and complicated, and it sounds like basically he was accused of sharing pre-scout information with other teams, which to me doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it's just weird. And I'm not sure that the Senators themselves officially ever, publicly said that, but that was the behind the scenes rumors going around that he was let go because of that. Never heard anything more from Trent's perspective. If, it's not a performance-based thing. That I think it's fair to say that. Obviously, he was around to help with the draft. That's been his forte. He was chief amateur scout for quite a long time before adding the AGM title. It's just weird. And to be honest, Michael Andlauer can't take over soon enough and certainly get rid of the drama in the organization, because that's been the problem around what's gone on there in the last decade plus. And I know when he was alive, Eugene Milnick often took a lot of the flack for causing a lot of it. But at this point, I have to think that Pierre Dorion likely just as guilty and created a lot of this as well. It sounds like, to me, a power move to remove people from the organization who could be a threat to take his job. That's my initial gut feeling, but without knowing more, I could be wrong on that, but that's just where things stand. I don't know. I can't wait for Andlauer to take over and just clear out the drama and have a fresh start. That organization needs it more than just about anybody else around the league. Now, as I mentioned, I do want to get into the Maple Leafs here as well. Like I said, not only in the ARB case coming up for Samsonov, but a few other things as well when it comes to some potential trades or other moves we might see regarding that franchise. So the Samsonov arbitration case right now is scheduled for Friday. So their numbers have been submitted for what they're looking for, and they are miles apart. So we'll see if they settle ahead of time, but when you're this far apart, it just seems less likely. And as I mentioned on Kurashev, when you end up going through the process, it gets complicated and it can damage the relationship. And considering Samsonov has been there for a year, and there's a new GM now as well, so he wasn't even part of the team last year when Samsonov was new to the team, etc. It just seems like it could, it might not really have a positive long-term lasting effect here. But the player's looking for $4.9 million. That's what they're looking for. Now the Leafs, apparently, according to Elliot Friedman, have made it clear they don't want to go long-term with Samsonov. They want a maximum of 3 years and are open to less. So looking at a 1 or 2 year deal, probably at this point seems more likely, in my opinion. The team is offering 2.4. So that's a tremendous gap. I mean, that's $2.5 million. That's a bigger gap than we're talking about with any of the other players on that team. Certainly every dollar counts in Toronto. We know that. They're very tight against the cap like a lot of teams, but they're very much top heavy when it comes to their top four forwards, eating up a lot of the cap, and they need to be wise as they can with every other dollar to spread it out. So certainly I do wonder, now we're less than 48 hours away from that arbitration hearing taking place. They can continue to negotiate right up until the hearing starts. Once the hearing starts, they're done, and they will get the whatever comes from it. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. But if they're that far apart, it makes me wonder, is there any chance that they're going to end up maybe trying to make a trade? Like, they can walk away from a ARB case too, depending on what the arbitrator comes back with. I don't know that he's going to get $4.9 million. That seemed a little bit much for 1 year of work that he put in Toronto last year. Obviously, his time in Washington was very much inconsistent, which is why they let him go there and let him become a UFA. But with Matt Murray, everybody suspects and assumed that Samsonov would get settled, Murray would be bought out. Now, Friedman's saying not so fast. That may not be happening. Matt Murray may not be eligible to be bought out, apparently, is what he's saying, due to potential health concerns. Now, obviously, the thing I find confusing about this is at the end of the season, Matt Murray was able and ready to come back. Matt Murray himself was interviewed in the playoffs and said that he was ready to go. They opted to go with Samsonov and Wall, and then I believe after Samsonov got hurt, Murray was backing up Wall. So, he was available to play. So if he was healthy then, I just don't understand why he wouldn't be healthy now when he hasn't been playing. I guess there's always other things that can happen, but it just seems bizarre to me. But this is not the first player we've seen this happen with who came back and finished the season and then ended up being declared unhealthy later. It just makes you really wonder some of the practices. Was he really healthy before, or were they just in a bind? I don't know. It just raises some questions for me. But all that aside, Matt Murray may not be bought out because of that, which means he could be a potential LTIR candidate, which would be, I'm sure, helpful for them because they can just spend further above the cap. We know they have the money. And then at the same time, he could also be traded, but they're going to have to add a sweetener to make another team take that on. And a lot of teams have already kind of made a lot of those moves. So we'll see. But Murray may not be done with the Leafs. But either way, it doesn't sound like there's any intention of him playing. But at the end of the day, he may not be bought out. Now, when it comes to Nylander and Matthews, Friedman's latest information there on NHL Network, he was talking about this, saying how there's still status quo, big gaps, no movement. It sounds like everybody wants somebody else to go first when it comes to getting a contract done. Nylander and the Leafs are about at least $1.5 million or more apart. They're looking to get him under $9 million. He wants more than 10. Don't know how much more than 10. Somewhere between 10 and 10.5 is the rumored amount. And obviously that's a huge problem. So like I said before, when we were talking about the Mitch Marner comments a couple days ago, like at the end of the day, this team has some issues here. And it's leading like if Nylander's not signed by the start of the season, I do seriously wonder, and many of the insiders and reporters feel that's when you're going to really be ramped up to having a higher likelihood of having a trade. That Tree Living is not going to want to go through this again like he did with Johnny Gaudreau last year and have Gaudreau 2.0 happen in his first year on him in Toronto. He's not going down that road again. And to be honest, it's in the team's best interest to get as much of this business sorted out ahead of time as possible so you don't have those in-season distractions. They're confident Matthews is going to sign. As much as that's dragging on, they're not worried about it. They know he wants to be there. They know he's going to take a 3 to 5 year deal, and it's going to be a hefty amount over what he's getting paid now. That much we can say with certainty. But when it comes to Nylander, like when you just compare him to his more logical peers around the league, it just doesn't make sense that he would get paid the kind of money that he's looking for. And with the cap where it is, it's hard to imagine how they can really make that work on a long-term basis. But at this point, like I said, no real movement. It's on a standstill. And it's not something changes on, and really Nylander and his agent both, with Lewis, because Lewis Gross is the same agent for Nylander as he is for Gaudreau. Like, this is not new. Like, this is the same tactics he's always used before, drawn out, and they don't cave. They value themselves at a certain level, and they're not moving. And at the end of the day, like, that's why I feel like a trade is more likely. But we'll see what Tree Living has to work with. Obviously, lots of work to be done in Toronto there. But the Samsonov ARB case, like I said, is coming out Friday. So either they're going to go through that process and get a contract done, or we're going to have an announcement done. And it wouldn't be shocking if they do have to make another move here to free up some space, depending on what Murray's status is, because we need clarity on that to really know what their full plans are. Friedman also has been talking with the Winnipeg Jets as well. Of course, they still have Connor Hellebuyck and Mark Scheifele, a couple of big names that are rumored to be on their way out. He said that in regards to Connor Hellebuyck, that he would not be surprised if he started the season in Winnipeg. So at this point, essentially the Devils are the main team that has been kind of interested in not only Connor Hellebuyck, but John Gibson in Anaheim as well. Obviously, Hellebuck's got 1 year left. Gibson's got multiple years. Gibson's going to come with a little bit more cost certainty because he's got more term, whereas Hellebuck's 1 year and a pending unrestricted free agent looking for a big raise on a contract. But ultimately, I think as much as teams value both these goalies, and in Hellebuck's case, think he's great and worth a lot of assets to give up to get him on your team, they don't want to do it just for 1 year, and because they won't be able to afford to pay him what he's looking for. And a lot of teams are kind of nervous and scared to think of those massive goalie contracts because they quite often don't work out. And they can obviously eat up a lot of your cap space, and you've seen teams win with a lot less spent on goaltending. So I think there's a varying degree of different opinions out there on what you need to be a cup champion. So we'll see. But at this point, as much as there's interest in Hellebuyck, with New Jersey being the primary, unless something changes, it seems more likely he starts the year in Winnipeg. Scheifele, on the other hand, has a greater chance to get a trade done. Obviously, making less money, his next raise would not be nearly as substantial. Yes, it'll be up a bit, but it would make more sense. That teams will be more comfortable paying it. I looked at teams like the Bruins, the Predators, Washington, maybe even Carolina. We know Carolina's also got some other things that they're involved with Karlsson, trying to work that trade out, although I don't see that happening, but they're certainly reportedly in the mix. They're also interested in Tarasenko. I don't know if anything's happening with DeAngelo. It looks like it's not now, but at the end of the day, if they have a hole in their team, to me, it's the number 2 center spot. And they have enough players there that I think that could intrigue Winnipeg to maybe pull the trigger on a trade. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, like I said, I don't see Carolina getting Erik Karlsson. I think he most likely goes to Pittsburgh. That's the most likely landing spot. But at the end of the day, Scheifele, more likely to be dealt than Hellebuck. But no guarantees. I think it's far from being a done deal at this point in time. But certainly lots of teams interested. But all those teams are, for the most part, like Boston, they're waiting on questions to be answered with, Bergeron, Krejci, etc. Washington, I think they're probably looking for some, additional details on the health of Nicholas Backstrom, for example. There's some speculation that is he going to play next year? I don't think that's a given that he does. In the Canes case, I think they make a lot of sense, but they've got some bigger things they're working on, trying to sort it out if they're going to turn their sights back on a guy like Scheifele. So Nashville, on the other hand, they signed O'Reilly, they moved out Johansson, they moved out Duchesne. Wouldn't be shocking for them to pull off this kind of deal either, but we'll see what happens. That is all your latest news and rumors all for today. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.